So why did I go on this trip? Typically over spring break, I'll go on a trip with one of my children, whether it be to on a mission trip or whether it be on a European study trip or some other type of trip. But usually over spring break, we're traveling. So this trip fell over spring break, and my sister-in-law called me back in the fall, and she said, hey, my daughter's school is going to Cuba on a humanitarian mission trip, and would you like to come along? And so I and my 14-year-old daughter discussed it, and we thought, yes, let's try it. We were a little bit nervous, but it sounded like a good experience, and we'd always kind of wanted to go to Cuba and see what it was like. So who went on the trip? It was myself and my daughter, and then my sister-in-law and brother-in-law and three of their daughters went. The little one stayed home with grandma's, and then it was my niece's school. So there was a group of about 30 people, I believe, and her school is called North Dallas Adventist Academy. So it's a private Christian school in Dallas, Texas that we joined on their trip to Cuba. So how did we get to Cuba? My daughter and I joined the academy, my niece's school, at the airport in Dallas, Texas. And then we flew together from Dallas to Miami, and then we flew together from Miami to Havana, Cuba. Once we arrived in Havana, we were met by some friends there of the schools, and they had arranged together with our school leader a chartered bus. And so we all piled into this chartered bus, and this bus was full because we all brought extra supplies to be able to give away to the Cuban people. There's some items that are really difficult to purchase in Cuba, so we had brought a lot of extra things to pass out. And so then this bus ride, which was very comfortable, a very comfortable bus, but it was about an 11-hour bus ride overnight across the island of Cuba to get to our destination. Our destination was a city called Holguin. It's the third largest city in Cuba. So I had actually thought that we were going to a little rural village, and we definitely did go to some rural villages, but our main destination was the city called Holguin. So I'm going to show you various pictures of Holguin and also the countryside and so forth. But it just wasn't exactly what I expected. What was immigration like? I didn't have any direct contact with leading the group through immigration. I was a passive participant towards the back of the group. But basically, the immigration hall, it was crowded. It was not air conditioned. We waited a long time. We ended up kind of camping out on the ground. We had brought some stools, and ultimately it's a group of teenagers. So if you're tired, you're willing to sit on the ground, and I was right there with them. So basically we did have some foreign exchange students with our group, and so there was some trouble with visas and things, but ultimately it all got figured out and we all made it through immigration. But it was a very long process, and they were very strict with screening about COVID. All of the staff, all the immigration staff were wearing masks, and at that point in the US, COVID or Corona was not a big deal. So this is the end of February, early March. And yes, we knew it existed in China. We knew it existed in Italy. And yeah, it was over in Washington State, but it really hadn't impacted the US like it has now. Once we made it through immigration and we got outside of the secure area of the airport, there were a lot of people, huge crowds. And then once we exited the airport, there were at least 50 to 100 taxi drivers there waiting. And so I'll show you a couple pictures of that. what is drinking water like in Cuba? Well, I can't speak for the whole island. I can only speak for the areas that we were, that we experienced. However, keep in mind that we were in the third largest city of Cuba, and the water was not, we did stay in a place that had running water. So that was great. We had water in the sink, water in the toilet, and then showers. But that water was not able to be, it was not potable. You could not drink it. So you have to go to a special place to get drinking water. And even when you get that drinking water, we all, or most of us, had bottles of water that had filters as well. So it was like, taking that extra step. There were many people in the city of Holguin, though, that didn't have running water. And I want you to see this little guy. He would come around the streets every morning delivering water. And so it was a really interesting scenario, because we in the West really don't think about not having running water, not having that ability to just drink from the faucet. But when you have to plan where you're going to get the water and making sure that it's safe water, it really does add an element of planning to your day. So why were we there? What were we doing? It was a humanitarian trip, and our primary purpose was to build onto an existing structure some additional rooms for teacher housing. And so that involved a lot of hauling dirt and then mixing cement and laying brick and all kinds of things. I didn't personally really support that part very much. I was more in charge of the children's outreach program, so we had a lot of crafts. So we were expecting, well, we really didn't know how many kids to expect each evening, but between 50 to 100 kids. And so we were preparing all the crafts and getting all the supplies ready and getting the skits ready and doing all that. So that's where I spent a lot of my time and energy. And then also I was there for the health promotion. So how can I go somewhere and not talk about pelvic health and the pelvic floor? Although this presentation, I actually did two presentations. One was on back pain, and I definitely incorporated the pelvic floor with that. And then after that back pain lecture, we just had a group of female only, and then we did a pelvic health little session there too, which was cool, and I'll show you some pictures. did I expect that I myself would be doing? Well, I expected to be kind of a passive chaperone. So I'm a parent going along with my 14-year-old daughter. You know, I'll make sure she and I are safe, and we'll interact and help the group some as needed. But I wasn't expecting to take an active leadership role with the group. However, the place that we stayed, so basically the group kind of got split up, and we stayed in at least 4, I think maybe 5 different places. And so the group that I was with, I got to be with the girls. And so we had, I think, 11 girls in one room, and I was kind of the room mother for those girls. So I got to be the person to say, okay, it's time for bed. Okay, everybody wake up. And so I started playing music to wake them up, and I actually started to get kind of rigid. I really don't like to be that person to say, oh, this is everything that you have to do, but somebody had to do it, so it was me. And I really got a nice opportunity to meet and get to know these girls, and it was a really nice experience. I was in charge of the Children's Outreach Ministry Program and also the Health Outreach Ministry Program. So the leader of the group and I had corresponded about that multiple times, and he was very patient because, as you can imagine, I had quite a few questions, and I don't think I'm really a high maintenance person, but I had a lot of questions, and I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to have all the supplies and everything that we needed and try to map it out and plan as best you can. Of course, the best laid plans sometimes don't always go through, but thankfully all of our supplies got through immigration because we were worried that we might have some of the things that we had brought taken and held, because that had happened to some other groups. But thankfully everything that we packed and everything that we had planned, all the supplies got through. The children's outreach program that we did was fantastic. So I'll show you some pictures of that, but the kids had so much fun. Our high school students had fun helping with it. We got to sing songs and do crafts and play games. It was just a really, really incredible experience. And honestly, I think we were more blessed by being there than we potentially, blessed them. But it was really incredible. Roads. So they didn't have freeways that I saw, like big highways and freeways like we have in the US, but they did have paved roads, and the road that we took for that 11-hour bus ride overnight was a paved road, but there were multiple areas that needed to have road repair. So, it wasn't necessarily a super smooth ride, but it was paved. Certainly there were other areas that had dirt roads, and there was one time when we were out in a little village and it had been raining, and everybody we got stuck. And so the group, first off, all the males got off the bus and tried to push, and that didn't work. And so then ultimately everyone got off, including the females. Some of the females helped to push, and then the vehicle was able to start moving again, and then we all got back on.
La llama Kawasaki.
street vendors. So I expected there to be a lot of little carts that you could purchase from, either purchase food or purchase little, when you go to any city, you see a lot of carts and street vendors, but they really didn't have that. It was very, very interesting. So I believe my understanding of the situation is that you have to be licensed, and there's very strict controls about who can sell what and where, and so that limits the entrepreneurship in some capacity there. The food. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. I thought that we would have some rice and beans and vegetables, but I didn't think it was going to sit very well on my stomach, and I thought I was going to lose weight in Cuba. But I didn't. The food was amazing. It was rice and beans, but they had so many different varieties of rice and beans. It was incredible. Plantains, we had beets, cucumbers, and tomatoes. And this is all locally grown, fresh produce and fresh food. It was simply delicious, and I did gain a few pounds in Cuba. And I'll be forever grateful to the wonderful people that made all of this delicious food for our group, because they were feeding us 3 full meals a day for 30-ish people. And that takes a lot of time, energy, and money to do that. And so I really appreciate them. Restaurants. So I thought there would be some restaurants, but in Holguin, when, a couple times we were able to go walking around the city, I think I saw maybe 2 or 3 restaurants. So they're just nothing commercial. Like, you didn't see McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King, any of those. There was absolutely nothing commercial. The restaurants that did exist, it looked like, you could go in and sit down. We didn't go to any restaurants. We had a large group, and, that wasn't in our plan or our budget, but there just weren't that many restaurants. And even when we went to, let's say we want to buy a Coke or we want to get some ice cream, they just don't exist. That doesn't mean that they don't exist at all, but it's not plentiful. Like, we would imagine if you go to the shopping plaza, which we went to the city center in a shopping plaza, and we would expect there to be a lot of stores and a lot of restaurants and a lot of selling of things, selling of food and drinks and so forth. That just wasn't there. Again, in the 3rd largest city, in the downtown plaza, I saw 2 or 3 restaurants, and it looked somewhat difficult to access, and again, that wasn't in our plan for our group. Stores. I had heard, so in my mind, these are the expectations that I have going to Cuba. I had heard that there were stores, like grocery stores, but that they might only have 2 items or 4 items, but they'll have a lot of that type of item. So maybe they have rice, and they have beans, and they have 1 other item, and that's all that are on the shelves. I'll show you a little video and some pictures of the grocery store that we went in, but that was pretty consistent with the reality that I saw in terms of the grocery stores. So you do not have the variety that you do in the U.S. in terms of multiple products and multiple brands within a certain type of food. The variety, from what I saw, was somewhat limited. Quite limited. That being said, even though it was limited, it was primarily healthy foods. So, we have so much junk food and unhealthy foods that we eat and consume regularly. And so I really want to commend that part of the grocery store. So the foods that they did carry were sustainable, substantive foods that were healthy.
Look at all the lentils.
Would you like some?
Yes.
Gatorade. I've been next some Gatorade.
Yes. Let's get a few of these.
And there's more.
The military. So I expected there to be military everywhere carrying machine guns, and that it would have a quite a visible presence. That wasn't the case. So we did see a few soldiers here and there, and some of them were carrying, but in terms of a big, giant military presence that you could see, I did not see that or experience that. Wi-Fi. Did we have internet access? Okay, so let's start off with what you would call like hotspots, where you can go and sign into public Wi-Fi. Well, that didn't exist for free. In the city center, like in the plaza area, there was this system where you could go to a store and you could buy a Wi-Fi card, and then you can use that card to sign in to the internet, to Wi-Fi, when you're in a certain area. So we did that once, and that was okay, but we could only do that when we were in the center of the city plaza. And with our schedule, I think only went there twice and only got on Wi-Fi there once. In terms of Wi-Fi in the place where we stayed, again, it was very complicated. So we had to work with the IT guy there, and it was, he was very generous to help us with his time and energy and expertise. But we had to have those Wi-Fi cards, and I'd say only 10% of the time did it work. And even when it did work, it was not streaming, not like it wasn't strong. Maybe you could do a WhatsApp call or a WhatsApp text, but it was very short and brief. So basically, think about this: you have these. Even I myself, so I use internet and Wi-Fi all the time, and so you're going, and I'm with a group of high school students, and we have businesses and schools to communicate with. So you're going from this high volume of Wi-Fi internet usage to almost nothing. It really felt like a detox. Like, oh my word, what am I? Like the first day or two, I was like, I can't check Instagram, I can't check my email, I couldn't do anything. But thankfully, I have wonderful people to help with various things, and I had told people, okay, I'm going to be gone. So it wasn't like I really had to do anything. I'm just used to doing these things, and it's part of my morning ritual and part of what I do throughout my day. And so it was definitely a change of pace to disconnect, but I kind of liked it after a while. Telephone usage. So again, I was expecting to be able to use my phone, and I actually could use my phone, but it was $3 a minute. So I used it very sparingly. It was very expensive. I think I made maybe 4 or 5 brief phone calls to my husband and the 2 children that I have that were still in the States, but it was very brief and very expensive. The temperature. So what did I expect? I expected tropical, and that's what it was. It was hot, but not too hot. In the morning, I could even put on a light little sweater. Where we slept was air conditioning. It had air conditioning, so actually a lot of the girls were cold at night. One night we tried sleeping without the AC because some of them were so cold the night before, but that was only one night. And then we just decided, okay, you guys just have to bundle up, put your sweatshirts on, do whatever you need to do, because we're going to keep the AC on at night. But during the day, we were out working in the various areas, and there was no AC, and we were just fine. You get used to it, you acclimate. Bugs. So I expected there to be a ton of bugs everywhere, that I'd be getting eaten up by mosquitoes, and I really got maybe a few bites throughout the whole trip, but I did not have a problem with bugs like I typically do. In fact, even out here, when you see me doing this, there's little bugs flying around me. So Cuba, I don't know what they did with their bugs, but it was a beautiful experience because the temperature was mild. They even said that it was milder than it normally is, not quite as hot as it normally was, and there were very minimal bugs. The church where we were kind of stationed at in Cuba, has an outreach ministry. And what their ministry is, I believe it's twice a week that they open their gates and they allow people to come in and fill their water containers, because the church has this water filtration system, this major system, and I'll show you some pictures of that. But it's an amazing outreach to the community. So people are able to come and get water for free. And like you saw earlier, water is difficult, and especially if you don't have running water. And even if you do have running water, it's not water that you can drink. So I think that's a really nice ministry and a really nice way of making an impact on people in their daily lives. So people really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so this church is putting their ministry into action by giving people pure, fresh, clean water. And I think that's amazing. We had one day that was like a free day, and so they had planned for us to go to a resort on the beach, which was pretty cool because we hadn't been to the beach yet and we'd been working. So we went to the beach, and it was our group, plus we took some of the Cubans that had been working with us and some of the kitchen staff, and so it was a really nice mixture of a group. And we got there and we got checked in, and we got our bathing suits on and so on and so forth, and we went to the beach. And so we're enjoying ourselves on the beach. But then, I noticed that the group of Cuban people that had come along with us didn't come onto the beach. They were staying kind of by the pool area, and they were visiting and talking, and they looked like they were enjoying themselves, but they weren't on the beach with us. And so I didn't really process, why is that? Why aren't they on the beach with us? And then later on, our leader told us, I found out that they weren't allowed to be on the beach. So if you're a native Cuban, you were not allowed to be on that resort beach. I think that there's certain beaches that if you're native Cuban, you can go to, but there's certain beaches that you can't. And that, of course, made me sad, especially since we were all guests at the resort. So they had paid their fee to be there, but there was still areas of the resort that they couldn't go to. We spent about a half a day in Havana, and so when we got to Havana, because we had left the night before and we had another 11-hour bus ride back to Havana. So we got to Havana that morning and we found a restaurant we thought that was open that could accommodate us. It was a little bit of a disaster, but anyways, we did get some food, but the electricity went out, so there was difficulty with preparing any food. And I think that their supplies and their quantity of things were just very limited. And then we also had potentially a language barrier in communicating, and okay, let's just be real. I'm a high maintenance orderer too. So I want to have this, take out this, substitute this. And so we didn't starve, but the food even at that restaurant was not even close to our delicious food that we had had back with our team in Holguin. Seeing Havana was a cool experience, so we got to go around and see some sights for about a half a day, and a lot of it was what I thought, in my mind, like you see the old cars in Cuba and so forth. So it was a neat experience. But by far the best part of the trip was in Holguin, working with the people, meeting the people, engaging and building relationships. So as we're leaving, probably the last couple days, I talked to my husband, and he's like, the U.S. is going crazy. The grocery stores, they're running out of stuff. The shelves are empty. People are panicking. You need to get back to the U.S. But it really wasn't possible or easily possible for me to leave my group 11 hours, travel across the island of Cuba, and we were leaving soon anyways. So basically we had heard that all of this was happening in the U.S., but we didn't really appreciate how intense it was, and we also really had no idea what to expect when we got to the airport in Havana, when we got to the airport in Miami. How was it going to be difficult to leave Havana? Was it going to be difficult to enter the U.S.? And how all of that process was going to go. There was quite a bit of anxiety and uncertainty involved in that. The reality of what we found was that it was quite easy to leave Havana. I think they were happy to be rid of the people from the U.S. and all of our potential germs. It was really quite easy to get into Miami. In fact, it was sadly, we were screened more before we entered Havana at the beginning of the trip than we were screened coming into Miami during COVID. And so I think that was March 12. I'll show you a couple pictures of the entry hall there. We're just all lined up. There's no social distancing happening. They didn't ask us questions about whether we were sick, whether we had a fever. We didn't get a temperature check. Nothing happened. So that was a little I don't know if it was necessarily disappointing, but it was unexpected because we thought we may even have to be quarantined for a couple weeks because we were coming from, another country. But that was not the case. We entered quite easily, and thankfully we were able to fly back to DFW, and my husband met us at the airport, and it was sad to leave everybody because you get to have such a connection. You're seeing these people. I think we were together 12 or 14 days. So you're seeing and working with people, and you're in this routine, and then you leave, and you don't know really if you're ever going to see this group and again. And even if you do, it's going to be different because you can't ever replicate that moment in time. Overall, I am so happy that I went on this trip. I feel like this was really kind of a divinely protected trip because so many other schools had their trips canceled because of COVID. We were able to go. In the whole country of Cuba, there were only 4 cases of COVID when we were there, so it was a protected area. And it was just a beautiful trip that we got to connect with a lot of amazing people, and our lives were certainly enriched and blessed, and I hope that we were able to also bless and enrich the lives of those people that we contacted.